So because of that, I would feel that outweighs the environmental cost of producing a new car would outweigh the marginal.
Yeah, but you assume that there's an efficient, in your statement, I think you're assuming that there's an efficient recycling process with regard to the old car, that it has some salvage value.
By recycling, I mean buy off of somebody else who wasn't going to use it anymore. Instead of jumping into bringing somewhere and buying a whole new car that needed the production that had to get produced, right? You're buying a car before you're adding to the demand for the car.
Right.
And the alternative is buying an old car somebody else has done this. Let's say, no way you can't drive anymore and you buy the car.
Mm-hmm.
So you're driving this old car now. It was produced long ago. It was already purchased at the price where it was new, and therefore
right.
You're saving that environmental cost of producing a new car.
Yeah, but that comes down to a factual question about what the environmental cost of producing a new car, and moreover, coming back to our conversation, whether you would still be producing a new car, regardless, right? And the level of pollution that's generated by the old car versus the new car. Because if the level of pollution from the old car, and by the way, this is a factual statement that's correct, it's not an assumption, that their incremental emission costs are much larger. And the question is, what is the size of that incremental cost versus the marginal cost of producing another automobile, and whether or not that other automobile would still be produced?
Well, most of it is system extend. You figure out those numbers and continue to drive the car until you can.
Yeah, yeah.
You would figure that out and stop driving it when the cost of the environment of the car was now less.
To give the right incentive. All I'm saying with regard to DMV fees is that they don't provide the right incentives for getting old cars off the road, everything else constant, because of their incremental pollution, versus new efficient cars. That's all. Yes?
I had a commercial license on my truck a while ago. I paid for the weight.
Yes.
Of it. So is all the commercial licenses work like that?
Yes.
Is that, I mean, I assume that's based more off the damage you do to the road.
Yes.
That's really logic for that.
Yes.
But in a way, it kind of targets larger vehicles generally.
Yes, there are isolated targets with regard to either heavier weight vehicles or vehicles that are very inefficient. They're certainly targeted, but they're not rationally implemented policies across all the incentives. I mean, if you're writing on a clean sheet of paper, you would design the right incentive that took into account not only the private cost, but in addition, the external costs associated with the use of those different vehicles. Did you have a question? No? Okay, I thought somebody. All right, let's move on. Active load. Let's take a concrete example. This discussion has been good because now I want you to visit with your neighbors and tell me what the right answer is, and it goes to policies that bite at two different levels. At the manufacturer level, I define, all of us know what the CAFE program is, right? This has been an active debate that's gone on for the last few decades, and there was just a new set of standards that were implemented by the U.S. government that sets more efficient standards with regard to the production of new automobiles. Efficient in the sense of more mileage per gallon, right? Not efficiency in the sense of less pollution necessarily. Okay? And that policy versus taxes on the driver, which is the end user, right? So the question in this active learning example, which is more efficient in reducing the driving externalities? Visit with your neighbor and tell me what the answer is. Excuse me, I'm sorry. What's that?
The regulations for cars, is that for, it targets both the manufacturers and the people driving California? So cars are manufactured in California?
No, these are mostly foreign cars.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, they're foreign cars, yeah. They're foreign cars, and the taxes are imposed at the point of sale. The first, yeah. Okay, Rachel, what's the answer? Shh. Pardon? Right, why? Exactly. So the marginal cost of driving, the CAFE standards lowers the marginal cost of driving, as Rachel just said, and it increases, the fuel taxes increase the marginal cost per mile driven. And as a result, it is more efficient with regard to reducing externality. So now the question is, how come we don't have higher fuel taxes in this country, and let's focus on CAFE standards? Why? Oil? What? Oil companies? Yeah, I know, that's what, are you part of the 99%? I'm teasing. No, it's not oil companies that are doing this. No, we're doing this. By the way, nobody wants to walk in the gas station tomorrow and pay $5.50 a gallon, right? We just won't stand for it. By the way, Obama wants to put himself at risk with regard to being reelected. Put a $2 per gallon on every gallon of gasoline that's consumed in this country. It's a political economy result. It's much easier to impose the burden on automobile manufacturers with regard to increasing those standards than it is to come along to the general population and say, by the way, we're going to impose $4 per gallon gasoline or $2 per gallon gasoline. There is a fuel tax currently, as you noted, right, with regard to, and that tax is supposed to be used for one purpose and one purpose alone, to maintain and invest in new transportation roads. Go ahead. Yes. Yes, no question. Yes. Subsidy. Yes. It's happened in every country in the world. Iran, Saudi Arabia, every country that is formally subsidizing, not taxing, but heavily subsidizing. The Europeans, as you noted, have imposed significant taxes, and they, too, have looked at the manufacturer versus the end user, and they have the same sort of programs with regard to emission standards on new cars, and they've also banned leaded gasoline in 2000. Netherlands, Norway, and Sweden use differential tax rates. Coming back to your commercial vehicles, they have a much different tax rate with regard to commercial vehicles versus individual vehicles, cars, automobiles. But Europe, coming back to your point about their taxes, one of the reasons that it was easier to digest politically in Europe because they have a good public transportation system, and we don't. So if you impose these high taxes, people can mitigate against those high taxes, right, by using the public transportation system. Here in the United States, in many parts of the country, that is not an effective alternative. Yes, yes, yes. They're more vertical. Right, right. Yes, Justin? It increases food costs more dramatically here in the United States than Europe. On the contrary, I would think it was the opposite. In large part, Europe, one of the motivations for economically integrating Europe is to lower the barriers associated with moving goods from one country in Europe to another. And we've always had, as part of our basic policy, interstate commerce, which means that there's more efficiency with regard to moving. That's aside from the transport costs, which I understand is your point. Yes? Yeah. Right. Yeah, no, they don't have any other choices. But listen, there are always choices, right? I mean, you can ride a bicycle. There are always choices. But coming back to this discussion, let me jump to the discussion we've just had. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to hold you responsible for it. Okay. There are all sorts of reforms that are suggested out there, but what I want to go to is a summary of the discussion we just had. Here we go. Okay. We just had the discussion about taxes are big stuff. This is all of a number of Western industrialized economies. Greece used to be, but it's not any longer. But look at where the United States sits. Look at their fuel taxes versus Turkey, for example. There's a lot of walking in Turkey. That's another form of transportation, right? You can walk, ride bicycles. Moreover, in terms of these kind of policies, these taxes, there's always unintended consequences. And you look at this and say, gee whiz, Turkey's got it right. I mean, they're dealing with these externalities. Now, ask yourself, is that tax program or that tax policy effective? Because the taxes are so large, it creates unintended consequences with regard to the incentives of avoiding the tax. Misreporting the amount of gasoline that you purchase. Misreporting the amount of gasoline that you sell, depending on whether the tax is collected from the seller or from the buyer. So one of the significant problems in Turkey, you can look at the actual production and imports of gasoline, and then you look at their taxes. What portion of that universe do they collect taxes on? It's about 60%. So 40% avoids the tax. So anyway, there are all sorts of consequences. Finally, with regard to the time we've got left, there's all sorts of policies that are being considered in a number of countries throughout the world. Congestion pricing, trying to create disincentives for overuse of available transport systems. Electrical peak hour pricing. Singapore has instituted this program. And there's a lot of talk in various cities in the United States of having a similar program. Insurance is another. The insurance you pay should, instead of being a fixed sum every year, make it a function of the amount of driving you do. Now, all insurance companies ask you for what your mileage is, but they don't document it, right? I mean, they don't prove it. So, you say, okay, last year it was 13,000 miles on my speedometer. This year it's 13,100. How are they going to determine whether it's factually correct or not? Private toll roads, reflecting all the cost. Parking cash outs, eliminate the parking subsidies that exist. Fee-based. And this comes back to a discussion that we had a moment ago in class. Namely, you want to give subsidies to those new purchases of efficient automobiles, but you want to tax the inefficient automobiles. And fundamentally, it could be a self-finance program, right? If you collected enough with regard to fees, you could use those fees in part to subsidize the purchase of what is the most efficient battery car out there today? I don't really know. Pardon? Okay, fine. So you subsidize the purchase of those, and you tax the purchase of Bentleys, for example. Right? No? You said no? Okay. Okay, pay-as-you-drive insurance, that's my point. These are the kind of reforms that would move in the direction of recognizing the externalities. And the final point, retiring, in the state of California, there are different incentives for retiring your own old, inefficient, emitting automobiles, retiring those automobiles. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks.